Hey folks, welcome to the Ramble. So in the last week or so, the dam has finally broke on a story that's really been building ever since Trump was elected president, but has really been building at a much more rapid clip in the last month or so since the Trump Justice Department, under the authority of Jeff Sessions, implemented a zero tolerance policy at the border where immigrants who are apprehended after crossing the border into the United States are now subjected to a zero tolerance policy where anyone who can be criminally charged is being criminally charged. And that is new. That just happened as of last month. So when people complain about what I'm going to spend most of this video talking about, the children of these undocumented immigrants being taken from them, when people complain about that, and Trump and Sessions and others say, well, hey, we're just enforcing the law. It's just the law. It's a law that the Democrats passed. It's not our fault. They're lying. They're lying to you. That's not true. It's a Trump administration policy that is requiring this to be done, and it's something that they could stop doing anytime they wanted. So when Trump faces reporters and they say, what about the children being taken from their parents at the border? And Trump says, hey, that's not us. That's the Democrats. They have to change the law. Congress has to change the law. You need 60 votes. He's lying. He's lying to people's faces, as he does on a daily basis anyway, so I don't know why we would be surprised by that, or why we would expect anything else from him. One of the things that has gotten it in the public consciousness so prominently in the last week or so is finally reporters were able to tour one of the federal facilities where children are kept. It is called Casa Padre, and it is at the site of a former Walmart in Brownsville, Texas, and media was able to go through and tour this facility. And most of the residents there are young men who came to the border unaccompanied. They're older children, teenagers. They're called unaccompanied minors. They were not taken from their parents by federal officials. They came to the border by themselves, and then they were apprehended and put in these facilities until some more permanent solution can be found. And that's most of the kids in these facilities like Casa Padre. But there is also a significant and growing portion of the population of these facilities who were taken from their parents at the border, who crossed the border with their parents, and once it was determined that their parents were going to be criminally charged, their parents were then sent into the criminal justice system, and their kids were taken from them and were put into facilities like Casa Padre. And it is that the Trump administration has the power to stop whenever it wants, and just won't. And there's a lot about this story that really hits us where we live, that tugs at our heartstrings, that reveals to us in a way that fewer of us than ever can deny the monstrousness, the depravity, the immorality of this administration. It feels like over the last 2 years or so, it's not so much that the Trump administration has gotten worse and worse, because it was awful on day one. And we all could see it was awful. Like, the signs were there from day one that this was going to be awful. But more and more has happened over the last several months, over the last year and a half or so since the Trump administration took office, to make that clearer and clearer, to render it more and more difficult to look away from or deny. Now, if you don't want to be angry about this, if you want to defend this, or if you want to feel like this isn't your problem, or this isn't something that you should be concerned about, or you should be outraged about, or you should be working to stop and to fix, if that's where you want to be with this, then now, because this story is all over the media, now you have to ignore this. Now you have to be okay with the fact that children who don't need to be taken from their parents are being taken from their parents and placed into a facility with other children who have been taken from their parents, and that it's something that the President of the United States and his administration are choosing to do, that they don't have to do, and are claiming that they don't want to do, even though it's the result of their own policy and their own choice. You have to be, now, in addition to everything else, you have to be okay with that. You have to tell yourself, well, that's not important enough for me to get upset about. That's not something that I feel like I need to worry about or I need to focus on. That's not something that's going to motivate me to try and do anything. You have to be that person. And thankfully, a lot of people are discovering that they don't want to be that person. That even if they have been negligent in their duty as citizens up to this point, and if you're not openly, actively, publicly protesting this administration, then you are negligent in your duty as a citizen. And a lot of people have realized when they get to this point and they read these stories about the kids at Casa Padre and other facilities like that, they've realized that they need to speak out. They need to speak up. They need to do something. Even if it's just as simple as talking to members of your family when someone defends Trump or when someone grumbles about, all the media, all the liberal media, the biased media, fake news, witch hunt, etc., etc. They really need to wrap up this Mueller investigation. Even if it's as simple as speaking out to that, as just raising your voice and saying, you know what, Dad, you know what, Mom, you know what, Cousin Joe, whoever, you're wrong. And you're defending something that is indefensible. And I'm not just going to sit here and be quiet while you grumble and groan and defend it. If you can sit there and watch reports on what is going on in this country, what the Trump administration is doing, and grumble and groan and complain about the media that's reporting on it, or about the investigators who are trying to get to the bottom of it, if those are the ones you complain about instead of Trump and his administration, then you're obviously way too comfortable. You're obviously way too comfortable. Your comfort and your privilege has gone to your head and has warped your decency and morality into something completely unrecognizable and completely useless, except to people like Trump. Because there's no way that a decent, caring, compassionate person could look at stories like this and be anywhere remotely okay with it. I've seen, and it's a series of stages. We've reached that stage where there are even more people who are saying, that's it, this is my breaking point. People who have never supported the administration, who have never apologized for it, who have never been anywhere near being on that side, but are now saying to people who are on that side, I don't want you in my life. If you're still going to defend this, if you're still going to tell me this isn't that big of a deal, if you're still going to tell me I'm too upset about this, I don't want you in my life. I've seen multiple people, friends of mine on Facebook, saying if you're reading these stories about kids being taken from their parents at the border, if you're reading stories about places like Casa Padre and you're okay with that, unfriend me. I don't want you in my life. This is becoming a breaking point. This is becoming a point where people are saying, okay, you're either on this side or you're on that side. And if you're on the side of the people who are taking kids from their parents at the border, then I don't want anything to do with you. You're not my friend. I don't want to be your friend. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to see you. There's another part of it too, that one of the justifications that is being used by the Trump administration particularly, and it's erroneous, as I've said, because there is no law that requires them to do this, but they claim that they're just obeying the law. They're just enforcing the law. It's what they're there to do. They are government officials. They're enforcing the law. They don't like it any more than you do, but it's the law, and there's nothing they can do about it. Again, not true. Completely fabricated. But one of the ways in which this argument is being made is by appealing to religion, and specifically by appealing to Christianity, the unofficial official religion of the United States. And the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, in a recent statement, in a recent speech, justified it by appealing to the Bible, by quoting Romans 13, which I noticed in an op-ed on in the Washington Post a couple of days ago. It was pointed out that the verse that Sessions used to justify this policy, the zero tolerance policy, is the same verse that was once used to justify slavery in the United States. It seems to be a popular verse among folks who are looking for biblical warrant to treat other human beings like garbage, and to say, hey, it's the law, we're just following the law. It's the way things are. Maybe we like it, maybe we don't, but hey, it's the law. And it got me to thinking, because I'm an atheist and I don't invest any authority in religious scripture. I don't think that religions speak for God. I don't think that holy books speak for God. I don't think that there are gods to be spoken for. I certainly don't think that a book like the Bible has any more moral authority than any other book necessarily. And I think that when you look in the Bible to find a warrant for something that you want to do, to find a justification for something that you want to do, you're telling people far more about yourself than you're telling them about Christianity, about the Bible, because Christianity is a wide and diverse faith. There are good Christians and there are bad Christians, just as there are good Jewish people and bad Jewish people, and good Muslims and bad Muslims, and good Hindus and bad Hindus, etc., etc., etc. These old ancient faiths that have been read and interpreted and reinterpreted and practiced in new ways for countless generations. There are more variations than you can imagine. There are as many variations of Christianity as there are Christians. And the kind of Christian you are, in many cases, reflects the kind of person you are. Because if you read into the Bible and you find all of these excuses for why you can be a terrible person, for why you can be cruel, for why you can withhold compassion and understanding from people in need, that tells me a lot about you. That doesn't tell me so much about Christianity, because Christianity can be read and practiced in a way that is kind and compassionate and graceful and beautiful, or it can be practiced in a way that is bigoted and prejudiced and authoritarian and intolerant and ruthless and brutal, as can other religions. So when Jeff Sessions reads the New Testament and he finds the spots that make it sound okay for him to take children away from their parents at the border, when it makes it okay for him to inflict unnecessary misery and hardship on people who are coming to this country to escape misery and hardship in many cases, it tells me about him. It doesn't tell me about his religion. Although I guess I could rephrase that and say it tells me about his religion. It doesn't tell me anything about Christianity in general. It tells me something about his Christianity, about how he chooses to interpret his scripture, how he chooses to live out his faith. Because even though I'm an atheist, and even though I don't invest any particular authority in the Bible or in any other holy book, I'm also a student of English literature, and I think that there are certain passages in the King James Bible that are absolutely beautiful, and not just for their language, but for the ideas that they express. And some of these ideas are expressions of moral principles that I think we would all do well to follow in our lives. I don't think that we owe those principles to Christ or to God or to the Bible. I don't think you need to believe in any of those things to find value in those principles. I don't think those principles are original to the Bible or to Christ or to whoever put those words in Jesus' mouth. I don't think it's necessary to have the religion, any particular religion, involved in it at all, to see the value of these principles. But these principles have been expressed in memorable and beautiful ways in the New Testament in particular, and particularly in the King James Version, and the New King James as well, which is slightly rephrased into more modern English, but keeps a lot of the same sentence structure and a lot of the same things that makes the original King James so memorable and so beautiful. And my favorite passage from the Bible is one that is in direct contradiction to Jeff Sessions or Sarah Huckabee Sanders or Donald Trump or anybody else using the New Testament to justify what they are doing to people at the border, to people who come to this country for a better life, who come to this country for help, and commit a misdemeanor in doing so. And it's a passage that I want to read to you. I have it up on the screen over here, and I'm going to read from the New King James Version. And it's from the book of Matthew, It's from the 25th chapter of Matthew. And at this point in the chapter, Jesus is talking to people about what heaven will be like. And he's talking about how he, as the Messiah, as the Son of God, the Son of Man, will judge the nations at the end of the world. After everything is over and God comes back and the judgment day is at hand, and Jesus, as the Son of Man, will judge the nations. And he's describing how that's going to work. And he says that he will divide the righteous from the unrighteous, and the righteous will be on his right hand, and the unrighteous will be on his left hand. And I'll start with verse 34. It goes like this. Matthew chapter 25, verse 34, the New King James Version. And then the king, meaning Jesus, meaning himself, then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" And the king will answer and say to them, "Assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me." I find that one of the most powerful statements of one of the most important and basic moral principles that exists, that I've ever read. It has nothing to do with the fact that Jesus supposedly said it and Jesus was supposedly the Son of God. I think it's just a beautiful expression of that thought. We should be judged based on how we treat the least fortunate among us, the people who are most in need of help, the people who are powerless, the people who are desperate. Inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. That's the person giving out the morals, saying, I'm judging you by how you treat the least, by how you treat the poorest, by how you treat the worst off. That's how I'm judging you. And when you showed them kindness, when you gave them what you had and what they needed, you were showing that same kindness to me. And I don't think God is necessary in that equation, and I don't think Jesus is necessary in that equation. I don't think you have to have an image of a God figure who will say, when you do it to the least of these, you do it to me, in order to understand the importance of that. When you mistreat the least fortunate, you are telling people about yourself. You are demonstrating who you are. When you help the least fortunate, when you give them something that you have so that they have it, so that they can be lifted up a little bit, you are likewise demonstrating who you are. And when Jeff Sessions or Sarah Sanders or Donald Trump ignores that passage that I just read, which is in the same Bible, when they ignore that, and they treat people who come to this country looking for help, who come to this country out of a sense of desperation, who want a better life for themselves and for their children, they treat them exactly the opposite as to what is said there, because if an immigrant coming to this country with nothing, crossing the border, is not the living embodiment of the kind of person that is spoken about in that passage, the least of these my brethren, someone who comes to this country with nothing, who left whatever they may have had in their old country behind and comes here for a fresh start because they think coming here and starting over with nothing is better than staying where they were with whatever they had. So they make their way to the border and they cross the border because they think, I would rather be in the United States than where I was. And how do we treat them? How do we welcome them? Do we follow the example that is set for us in Matthew? Do we say, they are hungry, let us give them food? They're naked, let's give them clothes? No, not anymore. We probably never did that, really, not as much as we should have. No, we don't do that. Now we have a zero tolerance policy. If we can charge them with a crime, we send them into the criminal justice system and we take their children away and we warehouse them. That's what we do. And we cite the same Bible that says, inasmuch as you did it to the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. We cite the same Bible in saying it's okay that we did that because the Bible says you're supposed to follow the law. The Bible also says, love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. The Bible quotes Jesus as saying that loving your neighbor as yourself is the most basic and most important aspect of the law. He also says love God, but as an atheist I can leave that out. I don't really think it's that important to love God because I don't think there is a God. I think it's very important to love your neighbor, especially when your neighbor is someone who comes to your country with nothing and is asking implicitly for your country's help, saying, I want a better life for myself, for my family, for my children. Please help me. Someone coming to this country with nothing and saying, please help me. And we arrest them, we charge them with a crime, we take their kids away from them, put them up in an old Walmart, and we say, we're doing the right thing, we're doing the moral thing because the Word of God says you're supposed to follow the law, even though there is no law that requires us to do that. These people are evil, the people that are doing this. Trump, Sessions, their various stooges in the Justice Department, in Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The people doing this are evil. And they have never been otherwise. They've always been evil. They've been evil for as long as you've known their names. And many of us have realized that. But as every day goes by, we realize more and more with greater and greater fullness of clarity what that actually means. It's one thing to philosophically recognize that something is evil or to intellectually be able to say, oh, that's an evil person. But it's quite another when you experience it and you see what that actually looks like. And you see how many people are able to look at it and tell you it's not that bad. Well, it's that bad. And the question is, what are you and I and the rest of us going to do about it?